On the 25th of June 2024, hundreds of protesters stormed the Kenyan Parliament building in Nairobi, Kenya, where a controversial finance bill had just been passed, chased out all members of the Kenyan Parliament, destroyed multiple sections of the complex, and set some sections of it on fire. Between the 25th and 28th of June 2024, many public and constitutional structures, as well as business buildings, were vandalized by enraged protesters, mostly young people. According to official reports, this demonstration was largely organized on TikTok and other social media platforms by the Gen Z demography of the country. On the same day, CNN and Al Jazeera reported that at least 23 young protesters were shot dead by the police, and many others were tear-gassed, beaten, and arrested by the military. This is sad because Kenya is said to be one of, if not the most, stable democracies in East Africa. However, the country is not unfamiliar with protests. In fact, Kenya has been rocked by protests since the colonial period and into her post-independence period, in the 90s and early 2000s, and particularly the violent protests that followed after the disputed 2007 elections, which left more than 1,100 people dead.
Inside the town, police engaged gangs in running battles as soldiers struggled to remove the roadblocks. There was little traffic on the Nairobi-Naivasha highway, one of the country's major arteries. The few vehicles plying the road were stopped and searched for members of some ethnic communities.
But this time, the nature of the protests is different. Young Kenyans stormed the streets of 35 of Kenya's 47 counties, including the capital Nairobi, in protests against what they termed a draconian finance bill 2024. The public outcry against the bill started when Kenyans realized that the Finance Bill 2024 proposed heavy taxation on citizens and residents, intending to raise about 200 billion Kenyan shillings to enable the government to pay off the country's loans. However, many Kenyans disagreed with the William Ruto-led government, saying that the economic problem of their country is not due to poor revenue, but largely stems from the government's extravagant and wasteful spending of Kenya's resources. In this video, we'll explore why Kenya went up in flames between June and July 2024. Here on Africana Historica, we unravel the complexities of our rich African history, culture, politics, growth, innovation, and legacy. If you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, please do so to stay updated on insightful African histories, and click the notification bell to know when we create new content like this. Let's dive in. Kenya is an East African country of 54 million people and a GDP of about 113.42 billion USD, or approximately 14.7 trillion Kenyan shillings, according to the World Bank Group. The economy is known for its multi-million-dollar flour industry, cocoa production, mining, cement production, and a few petroleum products. However, Kenya's GDP is mostly driven by agricultural products, such as tea, fresh flowers, fruits and vegetables, and coffee, constituting roughly 33% of the GDP every year. The agricultural sector employs more than 40% of the total population and 70% of the rural population. But under the former President Uhuru Kenyatta, Kenya's tax revenue stagnated, plus the economy performed poorly due to massive external borrowing. Between 2013 and 2022, when Kenyatta was president, the public debt stock had grown by 343% to almost 8 trillion Kenyan shillings, which is about 67 billion USD. Between 2022 and 2023, the country spent roughly 61% of every shilling collected in tax revenue servicing debt obligations.
It is instructive for the nation to know that for every 100 shillings we collect as taxes, we spend 61 shillings in debt service. We have paid Kenya's Eurobond debt that was borrowed in 2014 of $2 billion.
This debt burden has caused a strain on the local economy. This, in addition to several other issues, led to discontent among Kenyans and subsequent voting of William Ruto as the president in 2022. He made many promises during his campaign, winning 50.49% of the popular vote. Although Kenya's debt burden is much less today, William Ruto's government seems to be fiercely focused on redeeming the country from the discomfort of debt by paying the remaining debt it owes the IMF.
Today, Kenya's debt burden is much less, more sustainable, and we are on course to redeem our country from the discomfort of debt and assert our sovereignty.
Unfortunately, Kenya is not alone in this predicament, as more than half of the people living in Africa live in countries where a significant percent of the state's earnings go to debt servicing. You can see this heavy debt scenario play out in Ghana, Nigeria, Egypt, Angola, Morocco, Senegal, Mali, and Madagascar. And it is mostly due to mismanagement, weak economic policies, wastage, and a lack of competitive production and exports from the continent. Besides the imbalance between the country's low GDP and soaring debt profile, the Kenyan shilling also took a plunge against the dollar, which is its major trade currency, between 2022 and 2023, making matters worse for businesses and individuals in Kenya. The nation's currency depreciated 21% against the dollar in 2023. To address these issues, President Ruto and his cabinet members proposed the Finance Bill 2024 to generate an additional 200 billion shillings. This was after concessions were reached following a public backlash against the bill to cut out a 16% VAT on bread, 2.5% motor vehicle circulation tax, 25% excise duty on cooking oil, VAT on locally manufactured diapers and sanitary pads, an eco-tax on plastic goods, 16% tax on goods and services for the construction and equipping of specialized hospitals, and excise duty on money transfer services, 5% tax on digital monetary transactions, and an increase in import tax from 2 to 3% among many others. But Kenyans wanted the bill thrashed altogether because it would cause an unprecedented increase in the already high cost of living. They say that the government ought to cut its spending and do away with corruption instead of introducing more tax measures on the people to pay back huge debts. Experts have also described the bill as unrealistic based on its content. Dr. Jim McPhie, a senior lecturer at the Strathmore University Business School, Kenya, says the government must learn to live within its means.
Taxing a whole lot of things. And you know, one of the things that we just don't realize in Kenya is we've got to live within our means. And you know, that's not only the government, mind you, it's principally the government, because you know, I've always thought about this thing of leading by example.
You should know that for decades, Kenyan government administrations have been accused of lavish embezzlement of public funds despite repeated promises of a crackdown on waste. And President Ruto's government has been, unfortunately, caught up in the same web of wanton waste. A report released by the country's Auditor General in April 2024 said the Office of the Deputy President spent 10.2 million shillings, about 70,000 USD on curtains, and another 50,000 USD on furniture alone. The President's offices at Nairobi State House were earmarked for renovation at over 700 million shillings. In May 2024, the President, along with more than 30 other members, paid a state visit to President Biden in the US, flying a private jet that cost his country's taxpayers an estimated 1.5 million USD. Following public backlash, a government spokesperson said the benefit of the visit far outweighs the expenses. Shortly after the visit, and following conversations with Biden, Kenya sent 400 Kenyan police officers to Haiti to help tackle gang violence in the country. This further aggravated public discontent with Ruto's government, citing that it makes no sense to expect Kenyans to live in austerity measures while spending taxpayers' money in such lavish fashion. Remember that President William Ruto had served as the country's deputy president from 2013 to 2022 and acknowledged in his early days in office that the spending of the government is too much.
We must admit, honorable members, that as a country, we had been living large and way beyond our means.
But he seemed to have backtracked not long after getting into office as the president. This is because the parliament was bent on passing his proposed finance bill to collect more taxes, despite public outcry against the move. The rising cost of living makes getting by difficult for Kenyans, so at that juncture, the Kenyan people decided that they had had enough. The young ones decided to lead the fight this time. On the 21st of June 2024, young Gen Z protesters took to the streets of Nairobi on a largely peaceful protest to demonstrate to the government that life has become too expensive for them, there are not enough jobs, and they cannot bear any more taxation. Unfortunately, they were met with fierce resistance from the police and military, who brutally tear-gassed them and shot water cannons at the protesters, pushing them back.
Kenya's shilling weakened on Thursday and Friday as markets await the outcome of protests against a now shelved tax increase plan. President William Ruto's climb down on a controversial finance bill has left the country's efforts to meet International Monetary Fund targets in doubt, investors and analysts have said, and could make borrowing more.
But it all fell on deaf ears, because amid demonstrations calling for the rejection of the bill, the Kenyan parliament went ahead to vote in favour of the controversial bill on Tuesday 25th of June. And all hell broke loose a couple of hours after the bill was sent to Ruto to be signed into law on the same day. The protesters stormed into the parliament, chased away every member of parliament, and seriously vandalised sections of the parliament complex. Mwangi Maina, a Kenyan journalist with the Kenyan Foreign Policy online publication, aptly captured the situation and the unwavering resolve of the youth in an interview with Voice of Africa.
The Kenyan youthful protesters have called for 7 days of sitting rage in the country. They want to wholly total down the operations of the government, the operations of the country, so that is they will be able to pass a message and tell the government that, you know what, the power of the people is stronger.
The Kenyan government seemed to have underestimated the resolve and resilience of the young protesters, because even with massive arrests and loss of lives during the clampdown, they never stopped. Now they want Ruto and his cabinet to vacate office.
I'm so disappointed with this government. Yale tumeona leo hapa Kenyatta ni mambo ya maajabu. It's like a massacre to our children. Ruto, why are you killing our children? Kwa nini unaua watoto wetu, Ruto? This is a massacre for our children. You have decided to kill our children.
The reluctance of the parliamentarians and their refusal to listen to the requests of the people appeared to be the final straw that broke the camel's back. It was obvious that these young Kenyans weren't protesting just because of the Finance Bill 2024, but most importantly, because of built-up anger and frustration with the government's failures. Maybe since the time of Uhuru Kenyatta.
Let's just get more information from our political affairs reporter Daniel Kariuki, who is at the Parliament buildings. Kariuki, if you can hear me, what is happening? Talk to us.
It's actually, you put it right that the protesters have access to Parliament, and it is chaotic here in Parliament as we speak right now, as members of Parliament are...
Unfortunately, the protest took an ugly turn when some groups of youths started vandalizing business buildings and looting shops.
Today, Kenya experienced an unprecedented attack on its democracy, rule of law, and the integrity of its constitutional institutions. An otherwise legitimate expression of the fundamental rights and freedoms of assembly, demonstration, picketing, and petitioning of public authorities by a section of law-abiding citizens of the Republic of Kenya was infiltrated and hijacked by a group of organized criminals.
Ruto blamed the death of some of the protesters on these criminal elements and vowed to use every force of the state to bring them to book. Some have said that the orchestrators of the vandalization and looting were sponsored by Ruto's political opposition, but this claim is yet to be proven, as the people who were killed during the protests were unarmed youths, and the shooters captured on many clips on social media were armed Kenyan police and military men. Consequent to the violence that ensued in Nairobi and across Kenya, President Ruto finally conceded and rejected the Finance Bill 2024 altogether.
I concede, and therefore I will not sign the 2024 Finance Bill, and it shall subsequently be withdrawn, and I have agreed with these members that becomes our collective position.
Impressively, he didn't stop there. He also cut down government spending by a reasonable proportion.
I am directing for immediate further austerity measures to reduce expenditure, starting with the Office of the President, the entire presidency, and extending to the entire executive arm.
Operational expenditures in the presidency and other associated arms of government, starting from travel costs, hospitality, renovation, purchase of vehicles, and other expenditures were reduced. Some projects proposed to be financed from taxes to be collected had the finance bill be signed into law, were also suspended.
Minus the finance bill, it means that some of the development programs amounting to 200 billion shillings, we will have to cut down, to delay them. They will have to wait, some of them, for next year. We will try it again. We will try next year to find some money. Some of them we will have to cancel, because that's the nature of things. And it is because the people of Kenya have spoken loudly that they want a leaner budget for us as a country.
On July 5th, President Ruto withdrew the increase in salaries of senators, MPs, ministers, and cabinet secretaries following public criticism. Finally, the people spoke loudly, and the government seemed to be listening keenly. But maybe it's a silly game, because why in the first place were the salaries increased amid the massive public protests, only to withdraw the decision a few days after? Maybe it was done deliberately for the president to decrease it and fool the people into thinking that he is listening and working. But he didn't stop there. President William Ruto also removed the budgets for the offices of First Lady and Second Lady and dissolved 47 agencies amid the protests. He suspended non-essential travel for government workers and reduced his number of advisors and aides by half. In fact, President Ruto dismissed nearly his entire cabinet in a sweeping move to address public discontent following the weeks of anti-government protests led by the youths. But not everyone was impressed by the steps that President Ruto had taken to address the situation in the country. In fact, activists are calling for President William Ruto's resignation, partly because many Kenyans have lost faith in his commitment to the well-being of his people, and also because of the people killed during the demonstrations. Experts say that about 30 people or more died due to the brutality of the security forces during the protests. Perhaps one of the most infuriating comments he made following the killings was about a 12-year-old boy who was riddled with 8 bullets.
What did you tell the mother of that boy?
That boy is alive, right?
No, it's not.
Kennedy Onyango died.
He's died.
So he's the one who died?
Yes.
While all these were happening, the second contingent of 200 Kenyan police was again sent off to Haiti on the 16th of July 2024, an action which further enraged the Kenyan people. It is quite clear that this is a UN-backed mission, but the reason why the mission is being led by the East African country, especially at a time when there isn't really peace at home, so to speak, is still sketchy. Perhaps we'll explore this matter in another video. Right now, President William Ruto is on the edge and doing almost anything he can to win back the confidence of his people. Thank you for watching this documentary. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. This channel is dedicated to unraveling facts hidden in African history and giving you insightful updates on unfolding events across Africa. Speaking of that, the video on the screen is an insightful story you don't want to miss. Click on it now. We'll see you over there.